Coming up, looking to make changes in your life but not sure where to get started? I know just the person to ask. A special Ask the Expert edition of B Squared starts right now. Greetings and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Brandon Bridges, and this is B Squared. So longtime viewers of this channel will remember that in our second episode, I shared my experience with the Great Resignation, and the response was overwhelming. A lot of you wrote in to share your stories and basically tell me that you were grateful to learn that you weren't alone. But some of you wrote in to say that you knew that you wanted to make a change in your life, but you weren't quite sure how to go about it, because let's be honest, change can be scary, and when you're making a life change like your career, your livelihood, it can be scary. And like I said in the episode, it can be doubly scary if you're doing something like changing cities, moving across the country, or maybe changing your title. That can be scary too. So, fortunately, I know just the person to give you some guidance and inspiration to help you get started. With us today is the amazing Dani Reardon, an expert among experts in making life changes and someone that we are very fortunate to have with us. Dani, thanks for being here.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation. And as you were leading us into this today, as you were saying, moving across the country and changing jobs and doing this and doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, I have kind of done that a lot. So I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
And we are very happy and very fortunate to have you here. So before we get to the fun stuff, let's talk about your channel. That didn't come out right, but you know what I mean. Talk to us about your YouTube channel, because that's full disclosure, everybody. Dani puts out some great content on her channel, and I will admit on air that the initial concept to start doing guest spots on B2 was actually inspired by something that Dani did. So we have a celebrity here with us. So, but talk to us a little bit about some of the content that you create and what we could see on your channel.
Yeah. So, well, if we currently what I'm creating is podcast episodes similar to this, where whether it be me talking or I have a guest on, and it's really, my podcast is called Talking Each Other Home. And so what that is, it has a little bit of a spiritual concept, energetic, personal development, anything that we can do to help us be a greater version of ourselves. And like I said, I'll do solo casts as well and have guests on. And then if you want to look back a little further in my channel, there's all kinds of stuff when I was a professional bodybuilder, going to the Olympia, doing my workouts, speaking and doing this kind of stuff. So that's kind of there. But in the future, what I am wanting to create is a little bit more content that is driven to serve. So not so much the podcast stuff, but maybe me talking with some cool graphics, some overlays, me doing yoga, things like leading meditation. So I do have some big plans for the channel. And as we spoke about before, I'm a one-woman show. So it's kind of like finding the time to do all of these new things. But right now it's the podcast episodes with myself and my guests.
And with that said, like I said before, Dani puts together some good content. So make sure you go and subscribe to her channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell while you're there so you never miss any new content that she puts out. And by the way, tell her B Squared sent you. That way she has a reason to put up with all of my nonsense today. So, as you heard in her description just now, Dani has kind of an interesting background. She's moved around, she's changed occupations a couple of times. So why don't you walk us through maybe some of the professional changes that you've been through over the years?
Of course. So I guess the first professional thing that I was doing was when I was a professional athlete. I was a bodybuilder in women's physique, competing at the Olympia, which is like the Super Bowl of bodybuilding, if that's what you want to call it. I had the sponsors and the following and the YouTube channel and all the content creation stuff. And I loved it. It was my teacher. It was my martial art. I had been doing it since I was probably about 14 is when I kind of got into it. And then through high school, and then I was 19 in the adult ranks. And then by the time I was 25, I was on the Olympia stage. So my climb was early on and kind of quick. And then at 27, I looked around on stage and I was kind of like, my fire just went out for it. And, there was a time in my life where I was like, I'm going to be 80 years old on this stage. There is nobody that's going to stop me or going to kill my fire for this. And I am going to be Miss Olympia. And that is just how it's going to be. And luckily I achieved second in the world. I got fourth, I got sixth, though I did really well at the Olympia. In that last show, like I said, my fire for it just went out and I started to really have a change of heart. And I think this is the hardest part for some people, is to realize that something that they once loved so much and something that served them in such a big way started to not serve them anymore. And it wasn't as fun, and the luster kind of went away from it. And so that was a weird moment for me. And I started to get really into spirituality. And it was kind of a lead up during my bodybuilding career. And so there was a point where the spiritual scale tipped a little bit higher than the physical scale. And I was like, I don't really want to compete with people anymore. I don't really want to eat what I was eating anymore. The sponsors, the fame, everything just didn't serve me in the way that it once did. And so I kind of started to make the shift. And let me just back up real quick, just a small little bit. The reason why I felt trust in this shift is because before, bodybuilding was cheerleading for me. Through high school, through everything I did, I wanted to go to college and be a cheerleader. I made the cheerleading team, but I didn't get into the college. And so my fire petered out for cheerleading. And then bodybuilding came in. So when my fire went out for bodybuilding, I remembered that time in cheerleading and I was like, oh my gosh, you know what? I remember when my fire went out, but then something even greater came and something even more exciting and even more deep for me came. And so there was a little bit of trust and curiosity when the bodybuilding thing started to kind of fall away. And after that, I was really lost. I got to be honest. I was really lost. My identity was so wrapped up in bodybuilding. I didn't even realize it until I quit. I mean, my name on Instagram was Little Monster, and people didn't even know me by Dani. And I didn't even know who Dani was anymore. I was just totally Little Monster. I even went and got my education, my master's degree in exercise physiology, because I had to know everything about bodybuilding. And I'm so grateful that I did that. But when I left it, I was like, whoa, I don't even know who I am or what I'm going to do. And around the same time, my husband actually left his job. So I quit my sponsors. I quit bodybuilding. My husband, Ian, left his job, which he was doing GIS mapping, graphic, geospatial stuff. And we both went to go do health insurance. Sell health insurance, because at the time the money wasn't coming in. Our friends were making a lot of money with health insurance. Bodybuilding was sucking us dry kind of in so many ways. The traveling, the suits, the coaches, everything was just expensive. So we saw dollar signs and we're like, well, we have a lot of stuff to clean up from we kind of had a big expensive wedding. I won no money from Olympia. I thought I was going to win about 35,000, won nothing, zero, spent extra. So when we were looking at our lives, we're like, okay, what would kind of help us get into the right direction? And it was to make some money. And so we followed our friends, we did health insurance, and, it kind of really wasn't for us.
I think I still remember the first post that you shared, and I saw the word insurance in it, and I'm like, has this account been hacked or something? It was just such a sudden shift. I was like, this can't be legit. But I think there's an important lesson in what you just described for everyone who's watching. And that is, your identity need not be tied to what you do for a living. I've seen in all the articles that I've read about the Great Resignation and those who, like me, have shifted their careers, and like Dani, that have pivoted their careers, you have an identity that is separate from your job. And the concern that I see a lot of people expressing is, like Dani said, they don't know who they are separate from their careers. So that's where it becomes important to disconnect. I've been on PTO for the last week and a half, and I have done no work. And it's important to be able to do that. Love what you do, but know how to separate yourself from it when you need to. Mm-hmm. It's an important thing, not just for life, as Dani has described, but on the more basic level, it's also important to help avoiding burnout, because that's another thing.
1000%. And I think that's where I was when I was like, okay, this bodybuilding thing, I'm crashing here. And I think it was burnout for absolute certain. And even something else that kind of came up around that time, and like health insurance, it's so funny because it needed to happen on our journey. Like it needed to happen to make me who I am today, to have my husband have the job he has today. Like we needed to do health insurance. And it was probably one of the most dark times of my life. Not the darkest, but one of them, because we were making decisions from fear, not from love. And I think that's why we went in that direction, is because we were so afraid about money. We were kind of in this fear-based. And so we jumped at the first thing that looked like it could fix our fear-based problems. Instead of listening, what do I actually want to do next with my life? And tapping into love. So like love versus fear. And so after that, so health insurance happened. It taught us so much. Like I've talked a lot of shit about it, but it has taught me so much about so much. And
Explain.
it's like yeah.
No, explain. I want to hear more.
Well, I mean, even about, we were telemarketing. And so I went from living my absolute dream on the bodybuilding stage to telemarketing. And it taught me about people. It taught me about compassion. It taught me about sales. I have like the best sales training I have ever had from doing that. And it also taught me what happens if you don't do what you like. And that was a huge lesson for me because I was just not in a good space. So it was a beautiful contrast for me to go from living my dream to not living my dream, and to knowing what it feels like to make a fear-based decision, to not follow my heart. And yeah.
A friend of mine is fond of saying that the night is darkest before the dawn. So tell us what happened when dawn finally broke for you.
Yes, dawn broke. We moved to Colorado. So this was us moving from Florida to Colorado. So we had a big, huge change going from one state to the other. And we just kind of had to get away from bodybuilding, from insurance, from everything. We just had to start over. And my sister lived in Colorado. And I thought, well, what do I like? What do I want to do? And that was nature. And the nature in Colorado looks pretty sweet. I mean, big, huge mountains, amazing trees, and just like it was calling to me. And so I got dreads during health insurance because I was like, I want to be this earthy, kind of hippie soul. This is what was coming out of me after being judged on my appearance for so long. And so I started to switch the identity and moved to Colorado. And that was the dawning for me. And we had to rebuild ourselves from zero. And there was so much trust that had to go into the uncertainty of moving to a new state. Neither of us really had a set job. I started doing group fitness, at a F45, which actually ended up being awesome. But in that was the uncertainty that you and I spoke about a little bit earlier. And for me, one of my best pieces of advice is to follow the good feeling. And because how could a good feeling lead you to a bad destination?
I see the logic in that.
And so for me, the good feeling was my sister was in Colorado, nature was in Colorado, a new fresh start was in Colorado. So I followed everything that felt good. And to me, staying in Florida at the time just didn't feel good. So we left, and I eventually found yoga, or yoga found me. And then that kicked off a whole new journey of spirituality and self-discovery and discovering a whole new culture of the Hindu everything. And now I teach yoga. I study spirituality. It's like the thing that I just love and crave. And it's not necessarily one tradition or the other, but it's the fact that they are connecting to something that's greater than what we have here in this 3D world. And so that's the thing that like kind of draws me. And from there...
So let's recap. You found work that you enjoy. You moved to a location that to call it picturesque would be an understatement, because I've been to Colorado and I have relatives that are from Colorado. Let's see. What don't you have? It's like, seriously. And Colorado too. I'm imagining what the vistas of the mountains must be like.
Just amazing. It's something so different to look at than Florida. And Florida has its own kind of beauty. But Colorado really snaps you into, there's more here than being in a gym. There's more here than chasing money. And the culture of the people were really beautiful too. So it gave me a whole new perspective on life. And, a little secret about yoga, I started out so I was able to practice at the studio. cleaning the studio. So I went from being number 2 in the world on the world-class stage in the fitness industry to scrubbing toilets at the yoga studio so I could practice because I couldn't pay for a membership because it was too expensive. But they let people clean for a membership. And so I would go, and it was my favorite time of the week because I was serving someplace that was serving me so much. And I was able to sit there and listen to my teachers and my, Ram Dass and Alan Watts and the people that I love and look up to. That was my time for me and, my spirituality, and not like doing personal training or just trying to get by and trying to make enough money. It was my time of service. And so that's how my yoga journey started, was actually cleaning the studio and cleaning toilets and showers and not just yoga mats.
I can safely say on the list of things I was not expecting to hear today, that is number 3. So Dani just made another cogent point that I think bears repeating, and that is it's one thing to do work that is fulfilling financially. In other words, you can chase money all you want, but realistically, if the Great Resignation has shown us anything, it's that there are things that matter more than money. I mean, you can chase money and be miserable. I know plenty of people that make 6 figures and, like, when they get to their cars, they burn rubber out of the parking lot because they're so glad to be leaving work. And then there are people like me that just exceed the safe speed limit no matter what the circumstances. I mentioned in a previous video, I have a lot of experience in traffic court, and yeah. But the point is, 'tis better to be happy. Well, 'tis better to know what makes you happy and pursue that than to do something that's less fulfilling, if not unfulfilling entirely, because you feel like you have to out of that sense of obligation. And I think the biggest impact of the Great Resignation has actually been a shift in priorities accordingly. People are no longer staying in jobs that they don't find fulfilling or rewarding, and they're pursuing things that make them happy, whether that means working a job or staying home with kids or, going and starting a circus act. I made that last one up, but I'm sure there are people out there. So, So, yeah.
And on that note, and starting at the bottom is okay. Like starting at the bottom in a new field that you want to try out is okay, because there's something so beautiful and so exciting about the climb and about humble beginnings. And I think sometimes people don't want to leave where they are because they've reached this level of success, but it's not serving them anymore. And then they don't have the humility to come down and scrub the toilets. But now what I'm doing is I'm teaching yoga classes. I'm leading courses on it. I'm doing challenges online, and it's like so fulfilling. And if I had never had the humility to go from second in the world to cleaning toilets, I would not be where I am today with any of my studies. That some of the things that's the most important thing in my life right now is my studies. And so I guess
I'd like to add something to that. So I promise I didn't give Dani a script, but she just hit on another major, with a capital M, point that I think needs to be reinforced, and that is the subject of humility. So for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn, and for those of you that don't, why not? A topic that I like to talk about is leadership. And the most recurring theme is humility in leadership. It's an element that, like it or not, the 35 million people who quit last year felt was missing from their leadership. Whereas you look at the leaders that are showing empathy, that are leading from the heart, that are basically trying to establish connection with their employees, are the ones that are seeing the biggest success. Because think about it. Before the Great Resignation began, probably the industry that had the worst reputation in terms of toxic work environments was the restaurant industry, among others, but they're the scapegoats. We'll make them our scapegoats for today. But when you look at how a lot of those leaders treated their people, seeing these headlines about restaurant loses 80% of wait staff in 24 hours, it never surprised me. And I said it in my previous episode on this topic, but part of me has always believed that if those restaurant owners had invested more time and effort in developing trust and good relationships with their employees, they would have built up loyalty, and they wouldn't have gotten gobsmacked by personnel losses the way that they were. And so what Dani just said, empathy matters no matter what your role in the business world, no matter what your function. And again, I swear, I didn't give her a script. I didn't give her talking points. I just love it when things work out. But the point that she made about being willing to do things like, clean facilities and whatnot, there is dignity in all work. And I've heard many people in positions of authority, many good people in positions of authority, I should say, make the comment that they would rather have someone who's willing to be versatile and who isn't too good to do certain things than the person who's most capable in their job. I'm sure that made no sense because it made no sense to me, but I'm hoping you still picked up what I was trying to say. So, Dani, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you made such a valid point. I had to add 2 pennies to it.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now where do we go on the journey? It's been quite a journey.
Let me ask you the $1 million question. Are you happy?
Yes.
I figured the answer would be yes, but I want to spell things out for my audience, and yes. That's good. So let's run with that. So you went to Colorado, you found something that was fulfilling and that's helped you kind of rebuild your life in the image that you want. So maybe talk about, like I've said many times, even the most confident of us, even the most outwardly confident of us, still feels doubts when doing anything big. I mean, it's human nature. The difference lies in how we deal with it. So my hunch is, based on I think the right word is seismic changes that you've made to your life, I think it's safe to say you probably felt at least a twinge of doubt every so often. So talk to us about how you felt when you did feel doubt and how you dealt with it.
Yes, good question. And doubt, I think, is a very normal emotion or thought pattern or whatever we want to call it. And I heard this quote that I love, and it's doubt is just a step on the journey to faith. And I really like that because it normalizes doubt, because anybody that does anything great, I think, feels that. But it's not letting the doubt set up camp inside of you and win the battle. It's going through it. And somebody said the other day too, doubt your doubt. And I was like, that's so good. So I love those things because when I was bodybuilding, reaching all these things, there was a ton of doubt. I'm 5 feet tall, 115 pounds on stage, on a bodybuilding stage, like that those stats don't even work. So it's like, if I let the doubt of that seep into me, I don't think I would have been as far as I got. So bodybuilding taught me a lot about doubt. It taught me how to work out the doubt. That was actually one of my sayings, is work out the doubt. So like if we're doubting any part of our body, any part of our business or our life, go into that and give it some love and give it some attention, study it, perfect it, get better at it. So I think doubt is something that is a pointer to where maybe we can work a little bit more. And doubt is showing up right now in my life. So, after the yoga, blah, 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 I run an online business. It's called Conscious Champion, and I love it. And it lights me up so much. I'm so passionate about it. And I'm really creating something out of thin air. Like I created this masterclass in this mastermind, and now I'm hosting retreats. In this whole process, I have been battling with doubt because number one, I'm creating something out of thin air. Number two, I'm asking people for money, which is of course a little bit uncomfortable when you're the person doing it. And really, I'd like to do it all for free anyway, but you can't do that when you're building a business. So the imposter syndrome comes up. Am I really the person to do this? Who do I think I am doing X, Y, and Z? And so but I think that's a normal human emotion to be feeling. And it's to look at it and to know it's normal and to do it anyway. So one of my other favorite quotes is, to feel the fear, do it afraid.
Do it afraid. Do it afraid.
Do it
okay.
afraid. Yeah, do it afraid. I was going to say feel the fear and do it anyway. And that's, goes in line with that. But do it afraid because it's either you do it afraid or you don't do it at all. Mm-hmm. And I feel like by doing it afraid, you learn that, oh my God, everything's okay. I'm on the other side of it. I just did that talk or I just launched that course and people signed up for it and I'm good. And so I think do it afraid is also with like courageous. And I think courageous is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So doubt is normal, and don't let it defeat you, because it will. It wants to. There's a part in our brain, in our psyche, that almost wants the doubt to win, or it's igniting the doubt, like maybe that ego mind, the insecurity, stuff like that comes up. Yeah. I'm not even sure if I answered. Yeah.
Oh, that was an epic answer. And you see me grinning because I've had a similar philosophy. And a matter of fact, Danny's about to laugh at me because I'm about to show just how nerdy I am. But one of my favorite lines from the first Star Trek fan film I made was when the captain pointed out, in life, we are not always afforded the luxury of being fully prepared for the obstacles we meet. Facing the unknown is how we grow. And then later, at some point in our lives, each of us will meet a challenge that forces us to confront the very essence of who we are. How we meet those challenges is what defines us. And the whole time that you were going through that answer, that was coming to mind. I'm like, I like what she's saying, because she's right.
Thank you. And I love those quotes. I think you need to send those to me in an email whenever we're done with this, because that just hit me on so many different levels. Love that. And yes, I could see how they work and if you think about, what did you say? Challenges. We're met with a challenge that will
forces
ignite
us to
our
confront the very essence of who we are. How we meet those challenges is what defines us.
Yes, it is. And there's like a little bit of the hero's journey in that too, I hear. Is like, part of this is part of life is challenges and is obstacles and is suffering. And it is how we meet that is what we make of ourselves. And when we let our essence come out. So I think about something that's like really trendy right now, or that I hear being said a lot, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think about muscle and how it grows. And it grows by getting to the gym and by working it out and getting uncomfortable, letting it get sore, and then having it grow and get better again. And so right now at this phase in my life, like I said, I'm launching the retreat. I'm practicing to do a TED Talk. There's so many things in my life, and I am like leaning into the most uncomfortable things that I could find, because I know the other side of that is growth and is expansion, and anything that expands is not comfortable. It's a very uncomfortable situation. And I think if we want to tie it back to like leaving one career or leaving one state, that is a very uncomfortable situation, extremely, because change is not comfortable. But the only thing that's constant in the universe is change. So we better get comfortable with it. And I think when people change, when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain it takes to actually change, is when people will do the things that they need to do. And sometimes it takes a little longer than it takes, leaving a relationship, leaving a job, leaving a state, or a career. So yeah, I think about the pain in that too. And if we get comfortable expanding and getting uncomfortable, then there's no pain in that anymore. It's almost fun and curious and exciting to keep spreading our wings and to keep growing our bubble. And yeah.
And once again, I swear on everything I own, including my Campbell University lapel pin, I did not give Dani any talking points or anything. And like, she's making 100% sense, and I love that. And I'd actually like to share a quick anecdote that illustrates exactly what you just described. So, a long time ago, far longer now than it seems, I was working just an office job, and an opportunity came up to go overseas and do some work in a very challenging location. And, there I am. I'm 26 years old, and I'm like, I don't even have a credit card. I'm not ready to face like real life. But, I did it. And, the first time I was terrified, because I'm like, hey, this is the first time that I'm traveling internationally. This is the first time that I'm making use of this passport that I got more or less on a whim. This is the first time I'm going to some place where the water isn't potable. And just on and on and on. I didn't know what the living conditions were going to be. And like the entirety of the day-to-day existence was new and different, and only about half as scary as the process of getting from here to there. So I mean, I did it, and along the way, I'm not going to tell you that it was 100% smooth, because it wasn't. I ran into a minor medical issue, so I had to wait 30 days before I could actually go over, but everything was fine. And that was the job where I was using a Leatherman to open a Slim Jim, and I still have an inch-long scar on my finger. Yeah, I learned a lot. While I was there. And I came home, I came home, things got scary, and I decided to just come home. But, I dwelled here for about a year, maybe a little more than a year. And then I went back. The second time, it was to a different job. But the second time, I was more familiar with the process. And I'm like, okay, I got this. And I embraced it less as a challenge. Well, I embraced it as a challenge, but the scariness wasn't there, and I embraced it as an adventure.
Oh.
So, and part of it, this is how my mind works. Part of it was I was actually enjoying that there were some differences in the process. So, yeah, it's like, ooh, last time we were in that building, or on the third day, the last time I was here, they had mashed potatoes, but they have green beans today. I hate green beans, but I was still excited about the difference. So, the point of saying that is, like Dani says, when you stop seeing fear as your enemy, and you recognize that it's telling you this is different, but it's only trying to warn you that you don't know what to expect, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, to quote, since we were nerding out about Star Wars earlier, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's an adventure from a certain point of view.
Love it. Whoa, so good. And it is an adventure, and that's a beautiful way to look at it. And sometimes we need to go through the first big scary change to see that it's an adventure. And if we can tap into the adventureness of it during the anticipation before the change, and I love, it's just a perspective change. Versus it being this whole big life-changing thing. Look at it as an adventure. This whole life, from the minute we were born, is an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And something else to add to that is, it's not just embracing a new thing as an adventure and a challenge rather than as something to be feared. But another Star Trek quote is that there are always possibilities. Thank you, Mr. Spock. But the thing to remember is that when you're diving into a new adventure, a new job, a move to a new city, or, if you're just repainting your bedroom to, you had it chartreuse and you want bright pink stripes with purple polka dots, it's an adventure. And there are possibilities for where it can go and what it can lead to. So the thing to remember is, yes, anything can happen. But on the flip side, anything can happen. You see the difference? Dani, tell me that made sense.
Total sense. And I'm so happy you brought that up, because unknown can look like a big kind of black, like scary room of darkness that there's no light. We can't see where the next thing to go is or whatever. But that's also the space of infinite possibilities. So we may not know what's coming next, and maybe on one hand that's scary, but on the other hand, it's infinite on what we could create and what could come to us. So I think that looking at change can be viewed as the space of infinite possibilities. It could be whatever you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to extend the analogy probably way far past where Dani meant it to be, if we're looking at this as a metaphorical dark room, say, as a room without light, I know there are people out there who are going to say, yeah, but every dark room I've ever been into, there was junk strewn across the floor and I'm scared of tripping. Well, I felt that same anticipation's the wrong word, that same anxiety. And over the years, I've learned two things. One, always have protection for your shins. Just always protection for your shins, because the one time you don't, you're going to regret it. But two, along the same lines, if you know that there's a possibility that something could go wrong, and let's be perfectly honest, there's always the possibility that something could go wrong. A setback could be small, big, medium, whatever, but acknowledge that that possibility exists, but use the experiences that you've amassed already to try and brace for it. So to use the dark room analogy, if you know that people like to leave junk everywhere, and I fully admit that's me. There's a reason I have to use my phone to navigate my apartment at night. Then, try to navigate it as best you can. But, if you fall, have shin guards, wear knee pads. Again, we're stretching the metaphor way past where you meant it to be, Dani. But, what do you think about that?
I love it. It's almost like saying be prepared and just kind of roll with the punches a little bit. And I think sometimes the biggest suffering in life is when we resist what is, instead of just rolling with it, putting the shin guards on, and maybe pick up the thing that you just tripped over and say, can I use this in some way? How can I use this on my journey? And usually if you're getting whacked in the shins, there's a lesson there to either put your shin guards on or to take bigger steps. So I think that when we're getting knocked around by life, it's really trying to teach us a lesson. And it's whether we're quiet enough and open enough to hear what it is. And maybe it's to turn on the light in the room. Maybe it's to put on the shin guards. Maybe it's to pick the things up or whatever it might be. But that's what I found too, is if I continuously am getting knocked around, maybe there's a lesson that I'm not seeing or hearing.
And I think it's fair to say that when life does knock you around a little bit, like you said, the people that are the most miserable are the ones who are resisting it. The Borg would say resistance is futile, but that's a nerd reference for another time. I think the folks that tend to be best off are, like you said, the folks that embrace it, recognize a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, whatever you want to call it, and try to get the value that they can while they can.
Yes. And I think the underlying thing with all of this is trust. And trust with a capital T in, the universe, God, source, energy, Brahman, whatever you want to call it. Trust with the capital T that everything's going to be okay. In fact, it is okay. Even if there's some big stuff going on in your life, everything is going to be okay. And you will come out of this just like you've come out of every other shitty situation in the life. And trust in our own ability to work and to study and to keep going and to persevere. And I think sometimes when we have anxiety or fear of the unknown or whatever it might be, we're forgetting about trust. And I think whenever we trust, more things come to us. And also on the trust note, if our hands are full of, let's say an old career, for example, in order to let this old career go, there has to be an element of trust that something even better is on its way. And if we don't have that trust, why would we ever let this go? Why would we ever move state to state if we don't trust that there's something better on the other side for us? So I think in the process of change and the process of letting go, we have to really cross our arms and trust fall into the universe, because if we don't, we're never going to move. Never going to do the thing that our heart's telling us to do. And if your heart's telling you to move, if there's an inspiration and something inside of you that's saying, maybe this isn't the job, state, relationship, whatever it might be for you, trust that, because there was a point where that wasn't coming up for you. And if you're getting the hit that maybe it's time, I think it's time to listen to it.
God, you are a guru. Because again, you hit on something that I've been hearing a lot for the last year with the Great Resignation, but that has always been kind of in the back of my mind, or at least since I joined the professional world, and that is, we do have that sixth sense about when something isn't working. And I will tell everybody at the same time that the times when I've gotten into trouble are the times when I ignored that sixth sense. Like I started, if you remember episode 2, when I talked about the Great Resignation, I had this sense from the very beginning with one of those 2 toxic environments I was in that something wasn't right, but I couldn't put it into words. And I found myself in denial, because what I said to myself was, well, I'm young, I'm in the pond with people who are used to playing the game at a much higher level than me. So maybe they're playing by a rule book that I don't understand yet. But I was ignoring my gut feeling that was saying, Brandon, something's off. And if I'd listened to it before, or if I'd listened to it sooner than I did, that situation would have turned out a lot better. The next time I got that feeling, I didn't ignore it and I listened to it. And today I'm much better off for it. So, Dani making heap big sense, and I love it. And the other thing is when you talk about trust, I hear that, and what comes to my mind is not just trust, but a degree of optimism. So one of the a work anecdote that I've only shared a couple of times is there was a time when I was put in charge of standing up a new initiative, and I wrote the proposal for it. I defined the scope of work and all the things that you have to do to start something new. And there was another person on staff that was, the polite way to say it is, that was a negative Nelly. And every time I said, here's what I want to do, I would immediately get this like stack of emails that would say, yeah, but if you do the voiceovers, what happens if they don't like your voice? What happens if they don't like the color scheme that you choose? What if they don't like, I mean, just on and on and on. And it got back to me about 6 months after that was part of why I got put in charge, even though that person technically had seniority over me. It was because I look at something and say, well, these are some things that could happen, but let's try it anyway. And if these things happen, we'll figure out how to figure it out, you know, when the time comes. And that, not to brag, even though I know it's going to sound like that, no matter how delicately I phrase this, that optimism has been one of the things that's opened the most doors for me in life, personally, professionally. I don't know that there's another dimension of life other than personal and professional, but if there is, we'll call it too.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree. I have a very similar constitution about my life too. And it just seems like and just looking at the way things have happened, and I believe as within, so without. And so one of the coolest questions that I love to ask my tribe is a quote from Albert Einstein. He says, the most important question we can ever ask ourselves is, do you believe you live in a friendly or a hostile universe?
Ooh, that is a good one.
It's so good because it's as within, so without is right there. Perfect. So if you believe you live in a friendly, hostile universe out here, if you think everything is happening to you and not for you, if you think everything is out to get you, then it's probably a very hostile universe going on in here in your own head, because it has to be that way. It's law, universal law. And so it's no surprise to me that you have a very optimistic outlook on life, and then many doors have opened for you. You've gotten the positions, these things have happened, and it's because of how you vibrate and how your perspective on the world. So I love the optimism. In fact, it's a game I do when I get in Uber cars, is if I feel like the person is in kind of a negative Nelly mood, I make it my duty before I leave that Uber to get them talking to me, to make them feel super positive. They almost want to hang out or want my phone number or want to how can we connect more? And I just love to turn around somebody's day like that, and just show them that this isn't the way that we have to do this here on this planet. You can do it a little different. So that's just, I'm really happy you mentioned optimism, because I believe in that too. I think it's very important. And it's contagious.
Oh, and that's an awesome sentiment too, right there. And again, you see me grinning because another one of those quotes from the Star Trek fan trilogy I made was, never underestimate the importance of just a few words spoken at the right time to the right person. And what you just described with the Uber driver that's having a bad day is the perfect life application for that. I seriously love the way you think.
Likewise. And there's no surprise to me that we're talking here, right? So this is for me, it's called law of attraction. Have you heard of that before?
I have not.
Oh, law, it's my favorite. So it's not so laws of the universe. So it's basically law of gravity, Newton's law, they're just as real as that kind of stuff. Law of attraction says like energy attracts like energy.
Ah,
So just like the optimistic thing, you're feeling a optimistic energy inside your body and inside your mind, and it attracts optimistic circumstances to you. And so it's kind of cool that we found each other, because it's obvious that we think very alike. Maybe, there's different analogies that we have, but it seems like we have a very similar constitution. And I just love to see the laws of the universe work. It fascinates me, actually. And that's one of them.
that's cool. No, that is an interesting way to look at it. And as I alluded to earlier, the only laws that I really know that well are traffic laws, and I learned about those the hard way. So I have just learned something I did not know.
I'm giving a talk on the laws of the universe in 2 days in my mastermind that I was talking about. There's hundreds of them, but I talk about the 14 most important, most used, and it's one of my favorite talks because I come back to it. Actually, this is a good thing. I'm happy. Anyway. I'm going to reference another law of the universe because I thought about it earlier when you were talking. And like sometimes when we're, changing things and jobs and whatever, we're going through a very dark time in our life. And it can be very almost depressing and distraught. But a law of the universe says there's a law of polarity that says with every dark, there's a light. Mm-hmm. And everything in the universe is in balance, and this too shall pass, and it will flip the other way soon. Even great times in our life, even being on the top of the world stage, this too shall pass. So it's almost keeping a quantumous mind about what's going on. And so for people out there going through a little bit of a dark patch or a little bit of a rough situation, just know this too shall pass. And for every dark time that you're going through, there's an equal amount of light on its way to you. And it's law. So it has to be that way. And the other day I had kind of a bad day. Like I didn't really get any work done. I wasn't super focused. People called me. I had this, I had that. My blender broke and I was about to make a smoothie and I was so excited. So just like little stuff like that. And then I went to go take a bath at night and we had the dishwasher running. So the water was cold. Oh. And I'm like, you know what? Today is done. I'm going to bed. But I went to bed knowing that for every bad day, there's a good one on its way. And I woke up the next day and had a really, really, really amazing, productive, hot shower kind of day. And yeah, so it was just, when I have days like that and then I have a good day, I love to just relish in that law of the universe. And I even look at bad years of my life and then to like the most greatest years in my life. And so the law of polarity is another one I love to talk about because it's true. And it's even in Star Wars too, right? Like the light side and the dark side and the whole thing. So yeah.
And let me just say the fact that you can look back on a lack of hot water with such good humor is impressive. The times when I've been overseas, like even in Germany, where the hot water does not last as long as it does here in the United States, like I spend like 22 hours in transit and I finally get to the hotel in Germany and it's like, oh no, I've only got 5 or 10 minutes of hot water. Yeah, I can look back on it and laugh about it now because it's been about a decade, but closer to it, I don't know that laughter would have been among the possible responses to that. So the fact that you could laugh about that is very, very impressive to me, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, in the moment I was like, I was kind of like, okay, this day's done. Okay, we're going to bed. And I just kind of like left it there. I didn't really let it set it. And there may have been a time in my life where I did give it a little bit more attention and I did let it evoke some emotion in me that wasn't so pleasant. But I just, trusted, went to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. And it was.
And it doesn't hurt that when you go to bed, it's basically a time machine to breakfast. Just saying.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
You're talking to the guy that when he needed a bell sound effect for reaching a particular time in an animation, I didn't use the sound of a clock or an alarm clock or anything. I use the sound of a microwave bell. So I am food motivated and I admit it.
Food motivated. I've been there too. Like I'm going to work out harder so that I can eat this later. Food motivated.
Oh, the first day when I first started, random tangent, but I started running at the beginning of this year in earnest. And the day that I was able to get 4.22 miles in 35 minutes, I was on cloud nine, and I promptly celebrated by placing an order for Domino's, walking the quarter mile to Domino's, and making a medium thin crust pepperoni disappear in one sitting by myself.
Celebration.
Yes. So I admitted I have my vices. So, no, that's really cool. So when you look back, let me ask you this, because the folks that are out there watching are probably thinking that these two are just nerds and they're nerding out and they're not wrong. But the folks that are out there that have shifted jobs or that have pivoted careers, changed industries, moved from coast to coast, the question that they're probably wanting me to ask is, in all the changes that you've made, what is the single biggest challenge that you've faced, and how did you overcome it?
What is the single biggest challenge that I have faced, and how did I overcome it?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of like a big challenge.
I would say, just from the perspective of a layperson, if you went from, what'd you say, from Florida to Colorado, I would say that would qualify, because those two states are not co-located.
Yeah, that was a big challenge. It was fun for me. I think the challenge was the identity shift.
Okay.
Going from bodybuilding to I don't know what. And then creating another identity with the dreads and the earthy this and the whatever. Even going from that to where I am now. And so I think the identity shifts between all of this was the hardest thing for me, because I am on social media. So people start to know me as a certain thing. And then of course all the comments come, oh, we liked you better as a bodybuilder. Oh, what are you, a dirty hippie now? And so I've gotten it all. But it doesn't faze me at all, at all. And what helped me the most through that was when I shaved my head, buzzed it.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember seeing you did that.
There's only a couple way out of dreadlocks. And so that was one of the ways. And I remember the day where I was like, why am I keeping these things? My head hurts, my neck hurts. I'm sleeping on ropes. As much as I love them, they're quite uncomfortable. And I heard myself say, because you won't look spiritual without them. And I was like, interesting, because spirituality doesn't have a look. It's clear. It doesn't have an age or a race or a place or an anything. And so I heard that, and I don't know that I was to the point where I could have heard that before, when I was going from little monster, the bodybuilder, to this earthy, crunchy girl who wanted to, study whatever. The dreads were almost my help from switching that identity to that identity. And then I finally heard it, you won't look spiritual without your dreads. And I had the strength to go and shave my head and get rid of them and build my identity from that point to who I am today, which kind of isn't one thing or the other. It's not like you can't look at me and tell what I do per se. Maybe you can see the beads and think, oh, maybe she does yoga or something like that. But it was kind of creating myself and discovering what was there. So I think the hardest thing was the identity, and the way I overcame it was to really fully go into that and strip any kind of identity away and rebuild from nothing.
If I may, I would offer that courage probably played a role in that. I mean, speaking as someone who once shaved his head and had to come to grips with just how lumpy my cranium is, it takes real courage to do stuff like that. And in your case, it seems like the physical act of shaving your head carried maybe some additional significance. Like for me, I was just a college kid who did it because I wanted to save time getting ready and I wanted to save money on hair care products. But, for you, it sounds like it carried a lot more weight. So I would respectfully offer that maybe that was an act of courage on top of everything else.
Totally. It was. It absolutely was. It was courage, and it was time for a fresh start in every sense of the word. And sometimes people say dreads hold energy. So everything that was in my dreads was everything from bodybuilding, everything from Colorado, some of the spiteful decisions that I have made. And I kind of just wanted to get it all off of my head and start totally fresh. And it was amazing to have my head. I was totally buzzed. Like I keep this side shaved now, and it was pretty much that short, but over my whole head. And, I really got to discover who I was. It was actually really life-changing for me to do that, and it's totally courageous and easy to get ready in the morning.
Yes.
Easy. That's awesome.
Yeah. And what Dani just described was having the courage to take that first step and do the thing that was scary at first. And I think the common thread to all the stories that we've shared is things look a lot scarier from the outside, but once you take that first step, step 2 gets easier, as does 3 after that, and 4 and 5, and I can't count any higher than that, so I'm not going to try for fear of embarrassing myself, but you get what I'm saying.
That's so good that you said that. Okay, so with bodybuilding, and that's my analogy for everything, it's a very long road to get to the Olympia. And sometimes when people start bodybuilding or they start to, go on a path, they look at somebody who's very far ahead, and the path seems daunting because it's so far ahead. But we don't need to know how to get to the Olympia yet. We just need to know how to win the show that we're enrolled for. And so what you just reminded me of was this analogy when we're driving down a dark road, and we don't really need to see, 1,000 feet in front of us. We just need to see the first 200 feet. And then our headlights light up the next 200 feet and then the next two. So if we can just take one step from where we are right now, and then the next step will show up after that one. But sometimes when we look at the whole road ahead, when we look at our first show to getting to the Olympia or to driving from Colorado to Florida in the dark, it can seem like a very daunting task when really we just need to know the next step, and then however far we can see. And from that space, the next right step will show up. And so I think sometimes on a new journey, changing something, a lot of people get scared of the whole path that's in front of them because it is probably going to be a long path. But our focus needs to zoom way into just the next right step for us to take. And so I think for anybody out there who is thinking about changing careers, changing lives, changing relationships or states, what is the next best step that you could do that's more in alignment with like what feels good to you? You don't need, So I'll just leave that there. What is the next best step that you could take that feels the best?
And again, I swear, I'm going to keep saying this. I didn't give her any kind of talking points, no hints, nothing. And she's making 1,000% sense, and I'm loving it. And Yay. Again, what you just described, I've heard a lot of people say, when you look at something, it looks overwhelming at first, but that's only until you start breaking it down into its component tasks. So like, I'm about to make another nerd reference, but if you've seen the film Apollo 13, there comes a moment when Tom Hanks's character says, there are 1,000 things that have to happen in order for us to get home safely, and we are on number 8. And I think that's an important way to maybe look at the big challenges. You think, well, I have to demolish this gigantic mountain in front of me. No, you don't. You just have to whack it with a pickaxe 100,000 times, and each one brings you closer. It is a big task, but you have a roadmap to get there. And again, what Dani is saying is resonating with me like 1,000%, and I'm loving it.
Heck yeah, we're vibing. One of my favorite quotes is, baby steps will get you all the way to the top of Mount Everest if you keep taking them. And I just love that because it speaks to the baby step that we're about to take. And it also speaks to the length of the journey. And it speaks to the perseverance to keep going and not giving up along our path to whatever it is that we want. Even if we're building a business right now, I'm in the beginning stages of building a business, but I'm so grateful that I did bodybuilding because that was a business in itself. And, rep after rep, meal after meal, time after time, baby step after baby step, I made it all the way to the world stage. But had I given up at any moment, I would have never gotten to that point. And so I look back on that so much, and I look at where I am in my business journey. And, I'm like almost at the pro level. That's what I look at. I'm like, okay, so I've come a long way, but I still got a far way to go. But I'm almost excited by the journey now, not overwhelmed by it, not daunted by it, but excited for the next little step that I can take and the next little show that I could win or accomplishment. So there's that.
Well, you just used a vocabulary word that I think is very, very important. It's a word I learned in 1994 at the tender age of 9. Perseverance. And that's something too that I don't think we can emphasize enough. And people say, well, anyone can persevere, and it's like, no, it's tough. And I'm saying that as someone who's I like to think that I'm about as tough as they come, but it ain't easy. I struggle sometimes when there's a challenge. And one of the biggest things that will aid your success is like we said earlier, you're going to face challenges. You're going to face setbacks, and things are not going to go the way that they're supposed to go. And when that happens, the best thing to do is persevere, keep going, change your plan. I mean, have a plan first. That's probably the most important first step, is to have a plan, but then be willing to adjust it as challenges come. And again, it sounds like the most obvious thing when someone says it out loud, but like when you have a plan and you know where you're going, it is a lot easier to adjust that plan and still keep your eye on where you're going than to basically just be making it up as you go along and get stuck in potholes on the way. I mean, Dani, what do you think?
1,000%. I think like the plan or the vision, like what do you want? What are you creating? What are you after? And I think that's sometimes where a lot of people start spinning their wheels and they end up on a hamster wheel because they don't know what they're creating or what they want. So like, what is the next right step? It's all over the place. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I also love what you said about the adaptability to the plan. So you have the plan, you have the vision, but adapting along the way also reminds me of like Bruce Lee, be like water, flow like water, and it's just like the river will still get to the ocean. No matter how many boulders or turns it needs to take, it's still going to flow and get to its destination. But if we're so rigid in our plan, that might stop us because we're so rigid. And yeah, I think adaptability is probably one of it's kind of a hard skill. Adaptability and perseverance kind of go together, but they're actually hard to mesh, because perseverance is like, well, do I persevere on the path that I've set out for myself and the way that I thought it was going to go, try to control everything? Or am I adaptable to change and persevere through the ups and the downs, holding tight to my vision and not really caring how I get there, but just that I do get there? So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I say that from the perspective of someone that, again, if you remember the anecdote I shared a little bit ago, I've worked with people with different outlooks, shall we say, and some of them will meet in video gaming, the waist-high fence that you can see over, and then in real life you could jump over with no problem, but your game character can't get past it. I see people doing that in real life. They'll meet a small problem and pretend like it's this big showstopper. And like, if you do that, you're sabotaging your success in both the long and short terms. So, like we say, be willing to adapt. And you made a good point about the two not necessarily being mutually exclusive. It is possible to both persevere and adapt. To use the metaphor, if you're walking, it's like saying, I need to get 1,000 steps to get to that building there in the distance. And if you have to change direction to get around a rock or someone who's trying to sell you something, do it. You're still going to get there. Might be, like you said, might be by a slightly different path. And when you were talking about water too, the metaphor for the power of water is, consider the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was made by the Colorado River over a course of many, many years, and it didn't happen overnight, but one little stream did all that. So, just saying.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. Pretty powerful.
yeah, and it's uh, you think about it, you don't really think of the Colorado River as a force of nature because it's not like the mighty Mississippi. It's not cutting a continent in half. But I mean, when you look at the Grand Canyon, that's erosion. That's erosion over more years than I want to even try to count. So,
Wow.
yeah, and that's the thing. The river didn't care if the ground was soil or rock. It just went its merry way, and now we have a natural wonder. So, just saying.
And you mentioned something about persevering, and I wanted to say something about failure and how failing is actually a lesson, an opportunity to learn.
Yes, yes.
We're never really failing. And I reference bodybuilding a lot because it's something that I put a decade of my life into, but I failed my way to the top. And if I had let those little failures along the way, like I lost way more shows than I won. But every show I lost, okay, back to the drawing board. What did I eat that day? How were my diuretics? Like, how did I train? How was my suit? So it was always an opportunity to do better next time. And I think that's why I was able to compete time after time and to go for so long, is because it was never a failure. It was always a learning opportunity. So I always say, fail your way to the top. In fact, welcome the failure, because then it shows you where you need work. And that's what this is about. It's not about doing perfect work every single time. It's about perfecting your work eventually. Yeah.
Another very, very important point, actually. I'm going to avoid breaking out another Star Trek quote, even though I have one. But a lesson that I learned a long time ago, let's say, is it's better to fail and learn from it than to have never failed at all. Like, we humans learn more from a failure than we ever will from an easy victory. And I will tell you, when I'm interviewing someone, if I'm considering hiring them, I don't want the person who has a perfect record. Because someone who comes in never having failed, in my view, does not know how to deal with failure, does not know how to learn from their mistakes, and doesn't know how to process it. Whereas someone who has failed and who is humble enough to admit it and who is confident enough to admit it, that shows, one, you understand that nobody's perfect. Two, you know that you're going to make mistakes, and by an extension, you know people around you are going to make mistakes. And three, you know how to learn from your own mistakes, and you know how to help others learn from their mistakes. It's a small point, but the impact is big. I don't know a good synonym because it's late Friday afternoon and vocabulary is failing me, but that's big. And that's big. And that's one thing too that I think a lot of people could probably actually use some advice on. So let's talk about failure. So the first time any of us fails at something, let's be honest, we take it to heart and we feel bad about it. So Dani, what would you say to anyone one, who is afraid of failure, two, is afraid of being seen failing, not being seen as a failure, but afraid to be seen failing? What would you say to those people?
Well, I would say the perspective on failure is wrong. And the fear is also wrong, because failure is just an opportunity to learn. And I think that if people are afraid of being seen as a failure, we're caring way too much about what other people think. It's about your journey and your journey alone. And failure is just a step on the path to your perfect formula, whatever it is that you're creating. So welcome the failure, because if you're never failing, you're not learning and you're not really growing. And I think that, with working out, people say, go to failure. Like every time you lift something, go to failure, because that is where the most growth happens, is on the failure set. And so I say, change your perspective about failure just a little bit and welcome it. Fail first, keep growing, and desensitize this thing about failing. And if you're in it for the long haul, if you're in it to really create something great and long lasting, then the failure is just going to be a learning lesson. It's a chapter. It's not the whole book. And so don't be afraid of the failure, and also don't care what other people think and how they see you, because it really doesn't matter. It's your journey and yours alone. And when you do get to that final point or wherever you're trying to get, they're going to be the ones that are asking you, how did you get there? And your failures are going to be a point of inspiration, because we all fail. If we're trying anything new, if we're trying anything in life, I think failure is kind of inevitable. But I don't even like to keep using the word failure, because I want to use the word lesson. Learning is inevitable. So I think people out there who are afraid of failing, get rid of the fear, because fear is false evidence appearing real. FEAR. It's not even a real thing. It's misunderstood energy is what it is. So fear, change the perspective on that, change the perspective on failure, and change the perspective on caring about what other people think. Because that judgment doesn't serve you.
I was so hoping you'd break out the quote about Thomas Edison did not fail 100 times to invent the light bulb. He just found 100 ways not to do it, and not to do it very successfully. But he only had to find one way to make it work. And I'm also kind of surprised you didn't say, I don't know where this quote comes from, but I've heard it for years. No one who ever tried anything interesting did so without failure. In other words, if you don't fail, you're not trying anything interesting. I was hoping you'd say that.
I didn't know the exact wording from the quote, but that's kind of what I was meaning.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. And fear, there's a Star Wars quote. Yoda says fear is the quickest path to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think fear of failure stops you from trying. Because the fear, then the doubt, then the anger, then the jealousy, then the greed happens. And then your best work won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I guess that is a quote I can sprinkle in.
I'll take it. Nah, that's cool.
A little bit of force.
That's cool. Well, we're almost out of time. Any closing thoughts? Any words of wisdom to share with folks who need it?
If you're getting the intuitive hit to change something, do it. And follow the good feeling. If where you are right now doesn't feel good anymore, you deserve to feel good, even if it means getting uncomfortable, even if it means going through a little bit of financial whatever. Just know and trust that like you have the ability to rebuild anything. With every dark, there's a light. So don't be afraid of the dark times. Lean into them, because on the other side of that will be the light. And trust that everything is always working out for you. And I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I forgot what it was. Follow the good feeling. I think that was it. Follow the good feeling. That's my favorite word of advice, because a good feeling won't lead you to a bad destination.
And that's a good one. That's a good one. I wonder too what you would say about the idea that for people who are afraid of making mistakes, because I know they're out there. The people that are afraid of making mistakes, understand that you're not alone. We've all made mistakes. And I would guarantee you that whatever mistake that you've made, or even that you think you've made, someone else has faced the same situation. And even if they never cracked the code and figured out a solution, the important thing is you're still not alone. So if you're worried about making a mistake and worried about being judged for it, like Dani said, you're worrying too much about the superficial stuff, and you're not focusing on the opportunity to gain some knowledge. So it's all in how you look at it.
It is. And I remember what I wanted to say. Thank you for tipping me off. Start before you're ready. Start before you're ready. Jump in, learn the lessons. People wait way too long till they have everything in perfect alignment before they start something new. Totally 1000 billion% start before you're ready. Mess up on purpose. Well, not on purpose, but mess up and lean into the mistakes, lean into the failure, because you will grow into whatever it is that you're starting that's new. One of my favorite things, and even my husband and I say this too, is we'll grow into it. He started a new job. I started this coaching thing. We'll grow into it. And we always do. If we plant the seed and keep watering it, we will grow into it. So 1000% start before you're ready. You will grow your wings on the way down.
And wise words they are. Dani Reardon, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. And so impactful. So I appreciate you prompting me with these questions and having me on your show. This was lovely.
It is absolutely our pleasure. And you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Now, for more from Dani, make sure you go like and subscribe to her channel. And remember, hit that notification bell and tell her B Squared sent you. Give her a reason to be glad that she put up with my nonsense all day today. That's all we've got for you. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, this is Brandon Bridges reminding you the best way to be is B Squared. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Brendan is a fool. La 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 la.